All right, let's talk about the fundamental tools that protect our digital lives. I mean, think about it. Every single time you bank online, send an email, or even just browse the web, there's this silent, invisible shield at work, keeping your information safe. And that's a really good question, right? How does a message travel across the entire globe through who knows how many computers and still arrive for your eyes only? So let's pull back the curtain because we're about to open up the powerful toolbox of ideas that makes all of that digital privacy even possible. And here's the thing, it's not some single magical solution. Nope, it's actually a brilliant sequence of inventions, where each one was designed to solve a brand new problem that the last one created. We're gonna follow that exact quest for the perfect secret message, starting with the most basic, most fundamental tool in the box. So, let's start at the very beginning, with the oldest and, honestly, most intuitive form of digital secrecy, symmetric encryption. For thousands of years, this was the only game in town, from Julius Caesar all the way up to the 1970s, and it's still massively important today. The concept behind it is just beautifully simple. Think of it like a physical lockbox. You put a message inside, you lock it with a key, and you send that box to a friend. Now, for your friend to read that message, they need an identical copy of that exact same key. One key locks it, and that very same key unlocks it. Simple as that. So here's how it actually works, step by step. You start with your original data, which we call plaintext. Then an algorithm, using your secret key as a guide, does a whole bunch of substitutions and transformations to create this scrambled, unreadable stuff called ciphertext. And to get the original message back, you just run the process in reverse with the exact same key. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. How secure is this? Well, an attacker can always just try every single possible key. That's called a brute force attack. So the security depends entirely on how long the key is. And just look at this difference. The old DES standard with its tiny 56-bit key, a modern supercomputer could crack that in about an hour. But the modern AES standard with a 128-bit key, wow, it would take that same supercomputer over 500 quintillion years. That number is so big it's hard to even wrap your head around. It is, for all practical purposes, unbreakable. So the encryption is super strong, unbreakable even. But there's a huge catch, a critical weakness. How do you and your friend get your identical keys in the first place? I mean, if you can just hand it to them in person, that's great. But what if they're on the other side of the world? You can't just email them the key. An attacker could just grab it. And this is the key exchange problem, and it's a massive challenge. And that one problem, that single question, sparked what many consider the first truly revolutionary idea in thousands of years of cryptography. Back in the 1970s, a brand new way of thinking completely changed the game. So what was this big idea? Well, instead of everyone sharing one single secret key, the breakthrough was to use a pair of keys that were mathematically linked. One of those keys would be public. You could shout it from the rooftops. And the other would be kept completely private. This is the whole idea behind asymmetric or public key encryption. And this is just a brilliant solution. Your public key is like an open padlock. You can hand out copies of this open padlock to the entire world, it doesn't matter. Anyone can take that padlock and snap it shut on a message they want to send you. But here's the trick. Only you have the one-of-a-kind private key that can actually open it. The public key locks, but only the private key unlocks. So let's say Bob wants to send Alice a secret message. He doesn't need to arrange some secret meeting to get a key from her. Nope. He just finds her public key, which she can post on her website or whatever. He uses that to lock the message. Now, once it's locked, not even Bob can open it again. It can only be opened by one thing in the entire universe, Alice's private key. The key exchange problem solved, because that all-important private key is never, ever shared. Okay, awesome. So now our message is secret, but that's really only half the battle. How do we prove who actually sent it? How do you know it really came from me? And maybe more importantly, how can you be sure that no one messed with it on its way to you? We need to verify authenticity and integrity. The tool for this job is something called a secure hash function. It's amazing. You can feed it any amount of data, a tiny email, a huge video file, it doesn't matter, and it spits out a short, fixed-length string of characters. You can think of it as a totally unique digital fingerprint for that specific piece of data. And these digital fingerprints have some wild, almost magical properties. First, they're a one-way street. It's super easy to make the fingerprint from the data, but it's impossible to go backwards and recreate the data from the fingerprint. Second, if you change anything at all in the original data, even just a single comma, you get a completely different fingerprint. And finally, it's practically impossible to find two different messages that happen to produce the same fingerprint. Okay, so here is where it all comes together in a really elegant way. You take the hash of your message, that digital fingerprint, and then you encrypt that hash using your private key. What you've just created is a digital signature. Now, anyone in the world can use your public key to decrypt it and see the original hash. If that hash matches the fingerprint of the message they received, they know two things for sure. One, it absolutely came from you, and two, it hasn't been altered by one single bit. Now, in the real world, security engineers are nothing if not practical. So they get clever, and they combine these amazing tools to build systems that are both incredibly secure and super efficient. You see, there's a trade-off. Asymmetric encryption, the two-key system, is like the secure tortoise. It gets the job done safely, but man, it is slow. Symmetric encryption, the one-key system, is like the lightning-fast hare, but it's got that nagging key exchange problem. So, how do you get the best of both worlds? You use a clever technique called a digital envelope. This is just brilliant. Here's what you do. First, you encrypt your main message using a brand new one-time use symmetric key. That's the fast part. Then, you take that small symmetric key and you encrypt it using the recipient's slow but safe public key. That's the secure part. You just bundle them up and send both parts together. The recipient uses their private key to unlock the little symmetric key and then uses that symmetric key to unlock the main message. You get the speed of symmetric with the security of asymmetric. It's perfect. But, cryptography isn't just about protecting messages as they fly across the internet. It's also absolutely critical for protecting information that's just sitting there on a hard drive, what we call data at rest. And this matters so much. Think about all the horror stories you hear about lost backup tapes with millions of social security numbers, or laptops stolen from cars that have sensitive corporate data. If that data isn't encrypted, it is an open book for whoever finds it. Encrypting data at rest is your last line of defense. It ensures that even if someone gets their hands on the physical device, the information on it is just a useless scramble of data. So, let's wrap this up. Let's bring all of these ideas together and see how these different tools assemble to create the very foundation of our digital trust. See, each tool has its own specific job. We use those fast symmetric keys for the heavy lifting of encrypting our big files and messages. We use the elegant asymmetric keys to solve that tricky problem of sharing keys securely in the first place. And we use those one-way hash functions to create digital fingerprints that guarantee our data is authentic and has its integrity. They all work together to give us the confidentiality, authentication, and integrity that we just take for granted every single day. And that leaves us with a final and pretty profound thought. Our entire digital economy, our personal privacy, our global communications, all of it is built on one single assumption: that these mathematical problems are just too hard for our current computers to solve in any reasonable amount of time. So the question we have to keep asking ourselves is, what happens if one day the math breaks? What happens if they aren't too hard anymore?